Hi everyone! Today we're going to talk about whole numbers that are actually disguised as fractions. And we're going to start by talking about fractions that are equal to 1. So a big idea here is that we can tell if a fraction is equal to 1 whole by looking at its parts. So let's consider the fraction 1/4 for a second. We know that we're showing we have 1 out of 4 pieces here. Our numerator of 1 tells us we have 1 piece, and our denominator of 4 tells us it takes 4 pieces to make up 1 whole. So I could model that fraction like this. I know that that's less than 1 whole because I only have 1 out of the 4 total pieces that it would take. In order to be equal to whole, I need to have the same number of pieces that make it up. In other words, in order to have that entire circle filled in, I need all 4 parts of that circle filled in. That means that we could write a completely full circle as the fraction 4/4 or 4/4. The big idea here is that any time that you see the numerator and the denominator exactly the same, you have a fraction that's equal to 1 whole. That 1 whole is just kind of hiding, it's in disguise. So be on the lookout for fractions where the numerator and the denominator are exactly the same, because that means they're equal to 1 whole. Now let's take a look at another type of disguised fraction. And this is when a fraction is equal to whole numbers. Again, we can tell if a fraction is equal to whole numbers by looking at its parts. So again, consider the fraction 1/4. This tells us that we have 1 out of 4 pieces. I know that that's less than 1 because my numerator of 1 is less than the denominator of 4, which means that I have shaded in fewer pieces than it takes to make up 1 whole. So when my denominator is greater than 1, that means my whole is split into pieces. In other words, the denominator in this fraction was 4, which meant that I split up that entire circle into 4 equally sized pieces. But when our denominator is equal to 1, that means that the whole is made up of just 1 piece. So for example, I could have a model that has 4 complete circles. I don't have any lines drawn in these circles because I didn't split it apart. That means I have 4 fully shaded in pieces when it only takes 1 piece to make a whole. In fraction form, we would write that as 4/1 because again, the 4 as my numerator is representing the 4 fully shaded in pieces, and the 1 as my denominator is saying that it only takes 1 full circle to make up 1 whole. I didn't have to split it apart any. So the big idea here is that when our denominator is equal to 1, that means that the fraction has the same value as our numerator. In other words, 4/1 is equal to 4, which I can see from my picture is being modeled by the 4 circles. Now let's take a look at one more type, and this is when fractions become greater than 1. We can tell if a fraction is greater than 1 whole, yep, you guessed it, by looking at its parts. So again, if we have the fraction 1/4, that's showing that we have 1 out of 4 pieces, and I know that this is less than 1 whole because my numerator of 1 is less than my denominator of 4. In other words, the number of pieces that I have shaded in is fewer than the number of pieces it takes to make up 1 whole. When our numerator and our denominator are the same, we know that our fraction is equal to 1 whole. So when we had 4/4, that was the whole number 1 in disguise. But what happens if we have 5 fourth-sized pieces? Now this model would be showing the fraction 5/4 or 5/4. This is the same as reorganizing these 5 pieces into 1 whole circle and 1 extra 4th piece, which we can write as a mixed number. And the big idea here is that our fraction becomes greater than 1 when the numerator becomes greater than the denominator. So this is called an improper fraction, which we can also rewrite as a mixed number. So be on the lookout for any fractions that have a numerator greater than a denominator. So again, to recap, when your numerator is less than your denominator, That means your fraction is less than 1. We often call this a proper fraction. When your numerator and your denominator are the same, that means your fraction is equal to 1 whole. When your denominator is 1, that means your fraction is equal to the numerator. And finally, when your numerator is greater than your denominator, that means your fraction is greater than 1 and could be written as a mixed number. Thanks for watching this refresher on some special types of fractions.